So thank you for taking the time to come this morning. We're here for the launch of the publication, the Green City Development Toolkit. And today, really, I just wanted to give an overview of the work that's been done and some of the rationale behind why the toolkit was presented, the approach and design of it, why it might be relevant to the work that we do, and how it can be used, and perhaps discuss some of the reasons why it might be useful for us as practitioners to use. So what's the toolkit all about? It aims to be a practical guide for both ADB staff and consultants to support the urban operational plan and to be a reference that can be applied throughout the project cycle. It introduces some key concepts around green city development and sustainable development and capturing all of that, what integrated urban development means. And above all, it provides a one-stop shop for some of the available resources which are listed by sector and where you can find that information. Thank you. So the rationale for preparing the toolkit was under the acknowledgement that we're living in an urbanising world, and that trend is going to continue. And in Asia, some of these impacts are most pronounced. So I know that in the work that I do, I'm often asked by my colleagues, how do you prioritise? Where do you start? What do you do? And it's a really good question, because to address existing deficiencies, or how do you go for something which is more ambitious? And how do you get people to buy into something which is new, which is a change and which can ultimately lead to more sustainable outcomes? And so the toolkit's been prepared in the recognition that cities are complex, they're dynamic, and they're constantly changing. And there needs to be a framework which can situate how to understand where the city is at a developmental level and where sectors are within that. And above all, in an era with changing climate patterns and frequencies of disaster, how do you develop urban areas which are adaptable and resilient and, above all, livable and deliver the expectations of residents in those areas? So the toolkit's been prepared primarily to provide a framework and a reference guide that can be deferred to during the design of ADB urban programs and projects, which are increasingly being designed to support these green and sustainable outcomes. And underneath that, as a knowledge sharing platform, as a way for users to go to look at what resources exist and where they can find additional information. So the approach is that it has recognised the transitionary nature of a city, and it looks to conceptualise the various stages of a green city, and the following slides will explain the definition that the toolkit has adopted. And so from that, look to integrate actions across sectors and identify the cross-cutting themes which can help users to be able to think of perhaps interventions that will have a bigger impact because they'll cover more than one area. And as I mentioned before, it provides a consolidated and centrally located reference document which draws together the current thinking and examples of good practice in this field for people to refer to. So here, this is just a quick slide to show the relationship of the toolkit in regards to the ADB project cycle, and I'll explain the 3 steps in a moment. But I think what I'd like to draw out at this point is step 3 is really important because it recognises the feedback loop and that you need to be able to identify lessons learned from the interventions which you've designed and look at ways that can be incorporated. But moreover, coming back to the point and the underlying principle that cities are in transition and changing, how do you design something which takes the lessons learned and reflects the changing nature of a city? So these are the 3 areas that the toolkit has designed or framed it in: basic, eco and carbon positive, and under each of them the various components that you might see at each stage. So for green city development, it's multi-sectorial, and not every sector is going to be at the same stage at the same time. So the key is looking at ways that you can design projects and programs that reflect that state of flux and look to still deliver green and sustainable outcomes. So what does that mean? This is conceptualising how you integrate green city development. And on the left-hand side, we have what have been identified as the enabling components, so the policy and regulatory environment, strategic planning, and links to finance. And then how does that work across each of the sectors? And what are some of the features that might be presented in each of those sectors? And it's the interaction across those, and also being mindful to the enabling factors that will help to prioritise, to identify the need, and ultimately develop a Green City Action Plan or a development plan which will deliver not only green city development outcomes, but enable a city to transition at the various stages, either at the city level or at the sector level. So the toolkit presents a three-step process, and here we have step 1, step 2, and step 3. Now, step 1, which is by and large where the bulk of the work will be done, because it looks to build a profile. It's where there's an analysis of the existing situation, and it requires some thought as to what type of information you need and how do you get it. But recognising also that making a decision shouldn't be limited by imperfect data or the lack of data. So how can you support decision making by having the best available information to hand at that particular point? It's also important to recognise that this stage is not just about a physical assessment, it also includes a social profile. So looking at how the city is functioning through a social lens is equally as important as doing an analysis of what the physical features are. In step 1, the aim is to ultimately prepare a city profile, a sector summary, an institutional and financial capacity assessment, and from that begin to help move into phase 2, which is prioritising. And so step 2 then takes all of this baseline information and prepares a prioritisation and options matrix, with the idea that there'll be 3 main potential outcomes. 1, you can improve existing services. 2, you can develop new proposals. Or 3, perhaps actually you need something which is special or something which is unique, that is a once-off, that will help a city start on its green and sustainable outcome. And underneath that, there's a whole range of more detailed assessments which are undertaken. From step 2, it looks to move into step 3, which is where you move into your program or project design, but also the evaluation aspect of it, where you take the lessons learned and you look at the performance of what's been prepared and seeing what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. Under the design aspect, again, you can look at to improve existing services, you can look at new proposals, you can look at special interventions. And overall, that is how the toolkit has been presented within this 3-step process and relating that back to the ADB project cycle. Within that, there is a quick view summary of the available tools to users, and this is just a slide which shows that. So, and it situates it between phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, which is the 3-step process, and it does it by sector, and then after the quick view summary, it also then has a detailed assessment of each of the tools, what's contained with them, how do you use them, and where can you find them. As I mentioned earlier, it's not an exhaustive list. It's meant to essentially provide a mechanism to find where there's current thinking and good practice on particular ideas, and where you can find additional information. So from all of this, the expected outcomes are many, and I'll just summarise some of the key ones. But ultimately, the toolkit aims to support a comprehensive situational analysis, which will support users to identify where a sector is by its defined stage, either basic, eco, or carbon positive, where at a city level it is, and from that, look to design responses which will encourage a greater transition between those phases, with the cross-cutting issues highlighting where there's convergence and where you can have higher impact results. And finally, the outcomes here will help to prioritise city level and sector interventions, which, as mentioned, are based on an understanding of sectorial linkages and opportunity for integrated green city development to be developed, and to feed into preparing conceptual green city action plans or development plans for cities. And at a more practical level, looking at ways that terms of references for consultants can perhaps be adjusted to draw out some of these issues and the importance placed on these issues. So that's a really quick summary of the work that's been done and presented in the toolkit, and I'm happy to take any questions. It's available at the web link here, and also if you'd like a copy, you can email Jay, who is able to send that to your workspace. So thank you very much for your time this morning.